There are only a few days before Winter Veil's biggest night and the workshop is in a bustle. Santa's helpers are running in short supply, special thanks to the new height requirement of 3'2" or less. Luckily for us, we fit into that category just fine and are on the list for new employment. Normally to even stand a chance of recruitment, we require years of frosty training, but with the holidays so close, the nonbelievers are starting to gain a foothold in our lands. They're even deploying bunnies to bribe new followers. We must learn to stop this descent of disbelief in the cause. To test your recruitment as helper, Greatfather Winter has asked us to gather supplies from one of the coldest locations in Azeroth. The catch here is that he refuses to tell us precisely what we're searching for. Before venturing off, he grants us the capability to understand frost magic thoroughly and explains that leaving frost areas will cause this ability to shatter and potentially destroy the chance to save the spirit of Winter's Veil. Notably, he said swimming was alright. A strange thing to add, but okay. Leaving his side with a note and a purpose, I thought to start out by destroying the non-believers camp with gingerbread cookie grenades. I figured if I had these newfound powers, my best bet was to use them to strengthen our cause. The next stage led me to cause a diabetic coma for one of the captains against the Greatfather. He'll be okay, I think. On the way to my following location of interest, I read the note given to me, which had the letters I, A, and O strapped onto the copper coin. These three letters will likely guide my path somehow, but for now, one of my stops is in Coldridge. It doesn't take long for my experience to stupor some of the non-believers in a brutal cider knockout, but as I turned in my last class with Dumb Baroque, I felt stuck in the land with no natural way to gain experience. That's not to say I'm completely without, as I can take up mining to help gain some points. Herbalism will also help me gain resources to boost my chances of acquiring new techniques. However, beyond that, I found myself meandering around, gathering notes, and taking down extremely hostile enemies. I figured Northrend would be my next choice of landing since I could only stay in frost and snow climates. However, I can't fly to Stormwind, or I risk landing there and failing my task set up before me. So I looked at other options, and Winter Spring also came up, but a similar problem seemed to arise trying to get there, with the best answer being to go to Darnassus. I tried finding different solutions, maybe a way to port directly to Wintergrass, which does exist if you're an engineer. However, you need to have Goblin engineering score far beyond what I'm willing to put in for monetary value, and I don't have the funds for it anyway, even if I wanted to. In fact, with how little I was making in coins and no dungeons available in snowy spots, I was pretty much stuck to farming herbs for the experience. I even checked to see if Waycrest Manor was technically in a snow spot and asked friends about their thoughts. They agreed that it does not count as a snow and is just on the outskirts of the manor. So, how do I do it? Well, there is potentially a way. You see, Dalaran's hovering spot technically has a snowy place right underneath its surface, and so long as there is snow, it's acceptable for me to stand in those spots. However, does the location I teleport to have that snow white haven underneath it? We did a quick test to see what would happen, and as it turns out, the platform you spawn on is mere feet away from its location with snow. All the options were looking exhausted with different viewpoints, and moreover, since I can only learn frost magic from this point at level 21, I can no longer learn more mage spells because they are arcane, which locks up both of my trees. And even getting to level 30 to get flying would require me to land in Stormwind for training, so at this moment it looks like things are impossible to continue. Well, there is maybe one way. You see, an archaeology toy allows the user to turn into a wisp for 2 minutes. Technically, in this form, you're not touching the ground underneath. Therefore, if we improvise with a teleportation spell, we can temporarily move from one place to another so long as we stayed in the time frame. So here's the plan. Learn to teleport to Darnassus, pop the wisp form, run to the flight handler with a map that I have, and fly to Winter Spring before it wears off. Also, to gain more money for flying, I sold the herbs and ores for enough profit to get the base 150% once available. Doing so seems to have locked a letter from the Greatfather's note. I has now completed to the word improvise next to it. A and O remain uncertain. Some of you may think this strategy invalidates the run, and that's fine if you do, but I don't consider it as such, so I'll continue to move forwards. The improvise strategy gives us a new spot full of tasks to acquire materials. For now, the zone is providing enough experience to be sufficient, but there is another problem on the horizon. How do I get to the flight trainer? After all, their location remains a problem to my snowy disadvantage. Well, while I can't get to Stormwind as the trainer run is too far away, I can make my way to Northrend using the Wisp form, where another trainer can sell me flying. This opens up a whole new ballgame, as now I can fly to Stormwind without landing anywhere, so Chromie's access to Northrend is available. I first work on the rest of the Wintergrass questline, as I can't skimp on the experience, and it doesn't take very long to knock out the rest of the zone after getting my flying. Afterwards, I make my way to the past Dragonflight for more tasks to complete. The great thing about Northrend is that I also get access to several dungeons that are technically in frozen locations, the spread of Winter's Veil finding its way into the Oculus, the Nexus, and even the Sunken City. Dragonblight itself also provided the perfect grounds to spread holiday cheer. We got to see winter trees in bloom, allow some spirits to take a breather for the event, and even briefly marched into Halls of Lightning for a friendly delivery of soft-served frostbolts to the Ironfry Cool. Honestly, Northrend felt like a sweet spot for this experience, and I wasn't struggling to find much content to complete as Dragonblight's landscape is all snow. With the joint supplement of dungeons dungeons like Gundrak, short of some quests in certain places, I didn't think I'd have too many issues moving forwards. But as I was helping Brand Bronzebeard, I realized that I only had one letter of 3 filled out. Greatfather Winter likely had more in store for me than to continue working in Northrend. Was it to bring home a loved one who had lost their way? It can't really be that, because these events occurred in the past, so what happened here is already complete. Each combat situation felt like a frosty answer that didn't make sense, and Dragonblight, despite how much it had to offer, started to become less impactful as time passed. Eventually I felt that I had learned quite a bit from the spot, and I resorted to finding answers in the Storm Peaks. It was here that difficulties began to arise due to my lack of experience. My range of spells limits me due to needing full access to the tree. I often relied a little more on gimmick plays that gave me an advantage, and the deeper I went into the zone, the more strategic I had to be instead of brute forcing my way through. In a sense, this elevation spurred a new way of thinking, one that sparked innovation instead of setting it underneath a cascade of frost. Strength came from adjusting to my environment, and through those trials I had to sort out, I reunited and spreaded a merry moment between a family of dwarves. As we count down the final moments in Storm Peaks, the second word for the note writes itself out as adapt, leaving only one part left unsolved. Now, we have to figure this out. To progress in Dragonflight, we must get from the Waking Shores to the Azure Span without touching the ground on non-frost zones. So the question is asked, how do we do that? Well, here's how I ended up doing it. The first step is waiting for the boat for the arrival. Once complete, fly with the boat, but don't land at it until you see you're losing speed against it. Then dismount and pop into Wisp form. Let's look back at this map real quick. If you look at this spot here, you'll notice a river connecting the Waking Shore and Azure Span. We're not allowed to touch the land per se, but swimming is acceptable, which means we can take our Drake, fly it over the puddles in the river, rinse and repeat until we eventually hit the top end of the span where snow is available. We can continue to work from here, but buckle up if you think this will be a cakewalk. Let's look at this map of the Azure Span. If you'll notice, only about 50 to 60% of this map is actually snowy. If I go outside of this barrier and touch any spot while not in Wisp form, I failed the Greatfather's task. Thankfully, there are some avenues to help with the experience here, but they're not great. For one, Alterac Valley and Winter Grasp are available in this bracket. Both can be accessed for some needed experience when the quest route dries up. You can also specifically do the Azure's Vault for some experience, but since it doesn't have a high yield if you choose a specific dungeon, I only used it for some gearing. You'll notice I had to improvise for leveling outside of those two ideas by picking up Herbalism and mining via Wisp form of Valdrakken. I also chose the random epic battlegrounds because I had a 50% chance of getting the two I wanted. If I got them, then I'd play as usual, but each time I queued, I'd pop Wisp form and wait until the timer got down to around 10 seconds before entering. This way, if I got to something like, I don't know, Isles of Conquest, I'd be able to move to a body water and sit there until I was either kicked or the battleground was over. I could adapt to the circumstances given to me by this problem and even made friends along the way. And although I did this, most level in the spans took me around 2 hours to complete, with the finale taking almost 4 hours to finish. And as I hit that final bit of experience, the Greatfather's last words of wisdom came to me in the form of a single word. Overcome. You see, what I realized is that the holiday spirit is truly about understanding that things do not always go our way. We should work to reflect on ourselves, improvise on the things we can't change, adapt to the things we can, and overcome the obstacles placed before us to enjoy the love, serenity, and peace of those around us and what they have to offer. That is the lesson that the Greatfather taught me, and that is the lesson I pass on to you. Happy holidays, and cheers to a new year. Thanks for watching.